Wasn't a call, it wasn't a text, it was a voice message, 43 seconds long, and the moment I pressed play, I had to grip the edge of the counter just to stay standing. My daughter's voice, small, careful, like she was trying to make herself very, very quiet. "Dad, if you get this, please don't call the house phone. Aunt Lorraine has it. She took mine too, but I found Uncle Pete's old one in the garage cabinet, the one with the cracked screen. Dad, they said you're not coming back. They told me you're sick and you don't want to see me anymore. I don't believe them. I don't. But it's been 6 days and I'm really hungry and I don't know what to do." Then a pause, a long one. "I love you. Please hurry." I was in Portland. A 3-day project management conference that had turned into 5 days because of a vendor crisis that only I could sign off on. I'd spoken to my daughter, Ivy, 10 years old, 4th grade, collects pressed flowers in a journal she keeps under her pillow. I'd spoken to her 4 days ago. She'd sounded fine, a little quiet maybe, but I'd chalked it up to her missing me. She was staying with my sister-in-law while I was gone. That had been the plan. That had been the plan. I listened to the message 3 times standing in the hotel bathroom at 6:47 in the morning. Then I called her back on the number she'd used. It rang twice. "Dad?" Her voice was a whisper. "Ivy, I'm here. Baby, I'm here. Are you okay? Are you hurt? I'm okay. Are you hurt? I'm okay. I'm really hungry, Dad. Where are you right now? I'm in the basement. The door is locked from outside, but Uncle Pete left a screwdriver in the cabinet and I got the panel off the old phone." A pause. "I didn't break it, I just borrowed it." Even then, even in that moment, she was worried about getting in trouble for borrowing a phone. "Ivy, listen to me. I need you to stay exactly where you are. I'm going to call for help right now and I'm coming home. Do you understand me? Are you really coming?" They said. "Don't listen to what they said. I'm coming. I love you. Don't hang up." I put her on hold and called 911 from my hotel room phone. I gave them my sister-in-law's address in Clackamas County, told them my 10-year-old daughter was locked in a basement without food, gave them Ivy's name, gave them my name, gave them everything. The dispatcher's voice stayed calm in that deliberate way that told me she was already pulling up the address. She asked me to stay on the line. I told her I had my daughter on the other line. She said that was fine, stay available. I hung up and went back to Ivy. "I'm still here," I said. "Okay," she said. Just that one word, but I heard her exhale. I booked the next flight out on my laptop with one hand while keeping the phone pressed to my ear with the other. There was a 9:15 a.m. out of PDX to Seattle and then a connector to Eugene. That was the fastest option. I was already pulling clothes into my bag. "Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Is Mum okay?" I stopped moving. My ex-wife Ivy's mother, Claire, and I had split 3 years ago. Amicable, or as amicable as these things go. Claire had primary custody during the school year. I had summers and alternating holidays. But Claire had been in the middle of her own situation, a surgical residency relocation to a hospital in Boston. Temporary, she'd said. 8 months, maybe 10. Ivy had stayed with me in Eugene while Claire got settled. That was the arrangement. And when I got the Portland trip, we'd agreed that Ivy would stay with Claire's older sister, my former sister-in-law, rather than pull Ivy out of her school routine. Lorraine and her husband Pete had seemed fine with it. Pete was a retired contractor. Lorraine worked part-time at a dental office. They had a house in the suburbs with a yard and a dog. Ivy had stayed there before over long weekends and seemed comfortable enough. I had trusted them. "Mum is fine," I told Ivy. "She's in Boston, remember? She doesn't know what's happening yet, but I'm going to call her right after this. They told me Mum wanted me here, that Mum said I had to stay." A pause. "I don't think that's true. It's not true." "Okay." Another pause. "Dad, the dog keeps scratching at the basement door. I think it knows I'm down here. I don't know why that detail broke me. The dog. scratching at the door. I had to set the phone down on the bed for 3 seconds, press both hands flat against my thighs, breathe. Then I picked it back up. What's the dog's name? Biscuit. Okay. Biscuit knows you're there and Biscuit wants you out. Me too. Hang tight. I got to the airport by 7:45. Security took 20 minutes. I called Claire from the gate. It was nearly 11 a.m. her time in Boston, and she picked up on the second ring. I told her everything I knew. What happened next I can only describe as the sound of a person realizing the floor beneath them isn't solid. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She went very, very quiet, and then she said, "How long?" "At least 6 days," I said. "Maybe longer." Another silence. "I'm going to kill my sister," she said. She didn't say it dramatically. She said it the way you say a fact. "The police are already there," I said. "Let them handle it." Nathan. That's my name. She only uses it like that when she's about to say something that costs her something. I talked to Lorraine last Tuesday. I asked her how Ivy was doing. She said Ivy was great, said she was happy, eating well, helping with the garden. That was 5 days ago. I had nothing to say to that. The flight boarded. I sat in the window seat and watched Portland disappear beneath the clouds. And I thought about my daughter sitting in a basement with a cracked screen phone and a dog scratching at the door, telling herself her father was coming. Telling herself not to believe the things they'd said. What had they told her exactly? That I was sick and didn't want to see her anymore. That I wasn't coming back. Why would someone tell a 10-year-old that? What was the point? I didn't have an answer at 30,000 feet. I do now. But I'll get to that. The layover in Seattle was 40 minutes. I ran the terminal. I called the Clackamas County Sheriff's Dispatch from my gate and identified myself and asked for an update. The deputy who took my call confirmed that officers had been dispatched to the address and that a child had been located. He said she was being evaluated by paramedics and appeared to be in stable condition. Stable condition. My daughter, 10 years old. Stable condition. I asked if I could speak to her. He said they'd try. 60 seconds later, a different voice. A woman. She said she was a paramedic named Sandra. She said Ivy was sitting with her in the back of the rig. She had a blanket around her. She was drinking a Gatorade, and she wanted to talk to me. Then Ivy's voice, clearer this time. A little rougher. "Dad, there's so many people here." "I know, baby. Are you okay?" "I think so. My legs feel weird. Sandra says it's because I was sitting for a long time." "Sandra's right. That'll pass." "Dad." "Yeah." Biscuit kept trying to come down through the heating vent. He got his head stuck at one point. A little laugh. A small, tired, real laugh. It was kind of funny. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth for a second. "That's very funny," I managed. "I'll be there in 2 hours, okay? I'm at the Seattle airport right now." "Okay." A pause. "Dad, are Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Pete in trouble?" I thought about how to answer that. "Yeah," I said, "they're in trouble." "Good," she said, and she said it quietly, without drama, without anger. Just a 10-year-old girl with a blanket and a Gatorade, confirming a fact. I landed in Eugene at 2:20 p.m. I had a rental car reserved, but my neighbor, a retired teacher who'd known Ivy since she was a toddler, had seen the county sheriff vehicles at Lorraine's house earlier and somehow put it together and called me and offered to pick me up. I said yes. He was at the arrivals curb when I walked out. 35 minutes later, we pulled up to a house I'd been to a dozen times for birthday parties and holiday dinners and neighborhood barbecues. There were 2 sheriff's vehicles still parked in the driveway. The ambulance was gone. They'd already taken Ivy to Peace Health. But there was a county social worker's car and an unmarked sedan. And there was a woman I didn't recognize standing on the front lawn, talking on her phone. Lorraine was sitting on the front porch steps. She saw me get out of the car. She stood up. I want to be careful here because what I felt in that moment is not something I'm proud of. I'm not a violent person. I've never been a violent person. But I walked toward her. and I looked at her face, the same face I'd seen across holiday tables for 8 years. The face I'd watched blow out birthday candles. The face that had cried at my wedding. And I felt something I don't have a clean word for. She opened her mouth. "Nathan, I can explain." "Don't," I said. A deputy stepped between us, not roughly, just positioned himself. Let me know where the line was. I respected that. I took a step back. "Where's Pete?" I said. "He's inside with the detective," the deputy said. "Is my daughter at Peace Health?" "Yes, sir. She was transported about 40 minutes ago. She's conscious and stable. I'm going there now." I turned around and got back in the car. Ivy was in a room on the pediatric floor with an IV for hydration and a nurse who had, according to Ivy, already shown her 3 different magic card tricks. When I walked through the door, she was mid-explanation of how one of the tricks worked, gesturing with her hands, the IV line looping with her movements. She looked thinner. Her hair was matted on one side. There were dark circles under her eyes, but she was sitting up and she was talking, and when she saw me in the doorway she said, "Dad," in a voice that was completely ordinary, like I'd just come home from work. I sat on the edge of her bed and I held her, and I didn't let go for a long time. She smelled like hospital soap, and she was very still against me, and after a moment she said into my shoulder, "You came." "I always come," I said. "I know," she said. "I knew you would." Here is what I learned in the days that followed. Ivy had been at Lorraine in Pete's house for 11 days before I left for Portland. The first few days were fine, normal. Then I called Lorraine from Portland on day 2 and mentioned offhandedly the way you mention things to family, that the vendor crisis had been escalated and I wasn't sure when I'd be back. I said it might be another week. That is when something shifted. I don't know what goes on in a person's mind to make them do what they did next. I've thought about it many times since. The explanation Lorraine eventually gave through her attorney was that she had become overwhelmed and didn't know how to ask for help, and that things escalated. That's the word her attorney used. Escalated. As if a child locked in a basement is just a situation that escalated. What actually happened, Lorraine decided she didn't want to manage Ivy anymore. She'd apparently expected a long weekend, not 2.5 weeks. When I mentioned the extension, something in her snapped, or broke, or revealed itself. I'm not sure which. She told Ivy that I'd called to say I was sick, and that I didn't know when I'd be coming home, and that her mum was too busy to take her. She took Ivy's phone. She moved Ivy to the basement, which had a cot and a half bath, under the stated premise that Pete was doing electrical work on the main floors and the basement was safer. She fed her, at first, irregularly. Then, over the last few days, barely at all. Pete went along with it. That's the part that still makes me feel sick when I think about it. He didn't initiate it as far as investigators could determine, but he knew. He knew, and he brought her meals occasionally, and he didn't say a word to anyone. He let it happen. He locked the door himself, at least once. Ivy had figured out, by day 3 in the basement, that something was wrong. She was 10, not 3. She asked to call me. Lorraine said the phones weren't working. She asked to call her mum. Same answer. She asked to go to school. Lorraine said I'd called the school and told them she had mono. She asked to go outside. She was told no. On day 5, she found Pete's old phone in a storage cabinet. The SIM card was deactivated, but there was still Wi-Fi in the house, and she was smart enough to know that she could call 911 or send a voice message over Wi-Fi. She sent it to me through an app I'd installed on her tablet years ago that routed audio messages to my number. She didn't call 911 first because, and this still gets to me, she was afraid that if she called 911 and I didn't know, I might not find out. She wanted me to know. She was 10 years old and her first instinct was to make sure I knew. The door to the basement had a standard key lock, but the hinges were on the inside. On day 6, she found a flathead screwdriver in the same cabinet. But she didn't use it to take the hinges apart. She used it to remove the back panel from Pete's phone, and I don't know where she learned this. She says she saw it on a video once. She was trying to reseat the SIM card. It didn't work, but she'd already sent the voice message by then. She was just trying to give herself a second option. She had made a list on a piece of cardboard she found of everything she needed to do. Contact Dad. Contact Mum. Contact 911 if no one comes in 2 more days. She had a timeline. She was keeping track of the days by the light through the small basement window. She had a plan. The criminal case moved quickly. Lorraine was charged with unlawful imprisonment, criminal mistreatment of a child, and 2 additional counts related to denying Ivy access to medical care and educational attendance. Pete was charged with the same, with an additional count for the specific act of locking the door. Lorraine's attorney argued that her mental state had been compromised by stress and untreated anxiety. The DA's office argued that 6 days of deliberate confinement and food restriction was not a stress response. It was a choice made repeatedly over multiple days. The judge agreed. Lorraine received 4 years. Pete received 3. They are not eligible for early release under Oregon's guidelines for child mistreatment convictions until they have served at least 80% of their sentences. Claire flew in from Boston the night Ivy was admitted to the hospital. She walked into that pediatric room, and she sat on the other side of Ivy's bed, and the 3 of us stayed in that room together for a long time without saying much. At some point, Ivy fell asleep between us, and Claire and I sat on either side of her in those terrible hospital chairs, not talking, just there. Claire said very quietly, at one point, "I should have called more." "So should I said. "That's the thing nobody tells you about a situation like this. The guilt doesn't go away because you weren't the one who did it. It lives in all the small decisions that seemed reasonable at the time. The conference that ran long, the assumption that family meant safe, the check-in calls that had been quick and satisfied with fine and good and she's doing great. We did everything right on paper. And it still almost wasn't enough. Ivy spent 2 nights in the hospital and came home with me. She had a follow-up with a therapist the week after, a woman who specializes in childhood trauma and who Ivy, with 10-year-old accuracy, described as a little intense but actually helpful. She kept going. She still goes. She says it helps. She went back to school 2 weeks later. Her teacher, a woman who has the quiet competence of someone who has seen a lot and chooses her battles carefully, had explained to the class only that Ivy had been unwell and was back now without details. Ivy's best friend met her at the gate with a bag of Swedish fish and a handmade card that said, "I missed you a weird amount" on the front. I keep that card on my fridge. There is one more thing I want to tell you, because it's the part that I come back to most. About 4 months after everything happened, I was driving Ivy home from her Thursday afternoon therapy session. She was looking out the window, watching the neighborhoods go by, doing that thing she does where she gets quiet and you can tell something's working its way to the surface. She said, "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Always," I said. When I was down there after like day 2, I stopped being scared. Like I was hungry and I was bored and I was kind of mad, but I wasn't scared. Is that weird? Why do you think that is? She thought about it for a second. "Because I knew you were going to come," she said. "I just didn't know when. And I figured," she paused, tucking her feet up on the seat the way she always does. "I figured if I just kept doing the next thing, eventually the when would get here. I didn't say anything for a while. I just drove." "That's not weird," I said finally. "That's incredibly smart." "I know," she said, and went back to looking out the window. She is 13 now. She joined her school's emergency preparedness club last year, the one that teaches kids basic first aid and crisis response. She says she wants to study emergency management one day. She is calm in situations that would rattle most adults. She knows how to prioritize. She knows how to make a plan. They thought the darkness of that basement would undo her. She used the darkness to figure out exactly who she was. I still think about the cardboard, the piece Ivy found in that storage cabinet and used to write her plan. Contact Dad. Contact Mum. Contact 911 if no one comes in 2 more days. 3 steps in order, written by a 10-year-old girl who had every reason to panic and chose instead to think. That piece of cardboard tells me more about who my daughter is than anything I could have taught her on purpose. I've gone back over those 11 days more times than I can count, looking for the moment I should have known. The call where something felt off, the pause in her voice that I filed away as missing me. We want to believe that when something is truly wrong, we'll feel it, that love functions as some kind of alarm system. But it doesn't work that way. Love tells you to trust family. Love tells you to trust family. Love tells you fine means fine. It was not love that failed us. It was the assumption that the people we hand our children to have made the same internal promises we have. Lorraine had not. What I've come to understand about what she did, not forgive, understand, is that it was a failure of character that had probably always been there, waiting for the right pressure to surface. She was not a monster until the moment she decided her inconvenience mattered more than a child's safety. And then she made that decision again the next day, and the day after that. That is the part that gets me. It wasn't a single bad moment. It was a choice she renewed every morning for 6 days. The consequences she faces now are not random. They are the direct result of what she chose to do with the trust she was given. That is how it works, in my experience, not in any mystical sense, but in the plainest human one. The things we do compound. The things we do to children, especially, have a way of finding their way back. But I don't want to spend too long looking at Lorraine, because the more important thing, the thing I actually want to carry forward, is what Ivy showed me about what it means to raise a person with the right kind of foundation. She had integrity down there. She didn't fall apart. She didn't do anything that would have made things worse. She thought through her situation, assessed what she had available, and made a plan. That's not a survival instinct. That's a trained mind. It's something that gets built over years of small decisions, of being told the truth, of being expected to think, of being allowed to work through hard things instead of being rescued from every minor difficulty. She also had grit that I honestly didn't know was fully there yet. 6 days, hungry, isolated, being told the person she trusted most wasn't coming, and she kept her head. She stayed steady. She waited for the when. I think about the parents watching this who are hard on themselves about what they're not giving their kids, the activities they can't afford, the time they don't have, the perfect words they can't always find. And I want to say, what Ivy had in that basement did not come from anything expensive or elaborate. It came from knowing she was loved, knowing she was capable, and knowing that doing the next right thing matters, even when, especially when, no one is watching. They tried to break her with darkness and silence and hunger and lies. She made a list. That's who she was before that basement, and that's who she walked out of it as. They didn't take a thing.